Hello, my name is Matthew Dewey and welcome to Writing Today. In this episode I'll be talking about some popular tropes and ideas that are often used in cyberpunk stories. You can use these ideas to add to your story or simply create a story surrounding them. There's nothing wrong with that. As I've often said, when it comes to the cliches, the tropes that are often used in fiction, there's a reason they are often used. They work so well. They are compelling ideas that a reader can invest themselves into. They're also familiar. A lot of readers like to say they want something a bit unique, something different. But what they really mean is they want the same sort of story, just done better. Often, it's always about a hero winning in the end, and that is one of the most classic tropes that are used in fiction, which is why sometimes stories tend to end badly just for that sake of uniqueness, or realism as some would argue. But I say, if you encounter a cliche that you are interested in, and it could add to your story, don't push it aside simply because it is used so often. Definitely consider it when you are creating or plotting out your next novel. And that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. These are 5 ideas that you can use to create a cyberpunk story, create a plot surrounding these tropes. Now bear in mind, I'm going to break these ideas down to their most basic form because you need to add your personality and ideas to them in order to make them unique. Now this is really a setting-based idea. A dystopian future is often depicted as having a vast, sprawling megacity or megacities which dominate the landscape. These cities are typically characterized by towering skyscrapers, neon lights, and a stark contrast between the opulent levels and the gritty, dangerous lower levels. This is often the depiction of our future today. When we see these large cities that have this coldness to them, this concrete jungle idea, we often think about how the best people seem to flow to the top because they are the cream of the crop. They have the penthouses, they have the money in the bank accounts, the fancy cars, everything like that. Whereas the impoverished tend to live on the outskirts near the most dangerous parts of the city. So of course when it comes to these cyberpunk megacities, these extremes are taken to a whole nother level and sometimes literally. So what kind of plot fits well with this idea? The story of the dystopian megacity normally involves a protagonist who resides in or navigates these megacities. Usually they're uncovering corruption, defending the poor, or perhaps they're part of a law enforcement system and they're protecting the megacity as a whole. And they often experience both sides of these megacities, from the incredibly poor levels or districts to, of course, the incredibly wealthy levels. Now this is one great trope that you can use either as the entire story in not only its setting, but can also just be a small part of your story and your world space. So let's talk about the next trope. The next one we have is technological augmentation. In a world where cybernetic enhancements and advanced technology are commonplace, characters often possess augmented body parts, neural interfaces, or other enhancements that blur the line between human and machine. Again, something that is done fairly common in the science fiction cyberpunk genre, because this allows us to approach a story that's surrounding the idea of what makes a human human. So this is challenging our ideas of identity and morality. There's a lot that one can do with this idea, not just when it comes to approaching something that's a bit more spiritual or thoughtful when it comes to your plot, but it can also just be a great feature in your story. Once more, this can be defined by class systems. For example, those who are incredibly wealthy might have access to better augmentations, and as such gain a bit more power and influence over those who don't have those augmentations to boost their human capabilities. That's something you can normally expect the human race to do, to challenge itself on these different technological advancements in order to improve upon them as well. So like I said, this can be a plot that typically revolves around identity, morality, the consequences of technological advancement. I'm pretty sure we are seeing some of those in the newspapers today. Some would disagree, some would happily say these are the signs of the end times. But of course, when it comes to a science fiction cyberpunk story, you can really take this in a more literal sense. So create a story where characters may need to grapple with the loss of humanity as they embrace cybernetic enhancements, or it could be about dealing with the ethical dilemmas of manipulating human biology with technology. Again, this is something we have seen not only in books but also movies, from Blade Runner to RoboCop. So you can talk about this in your story that is all about the artificial evolution that humans are fast heading towards. Our next trope and idea is simply about hackers and cyber warfare. Now, the internet and virtual reality play a central role in most of these cyberpunk stories. And of course, if the governments or corporations or even criminal organizations get involved, it can be this great battle for power over the people through a different type of conflict, one that is on a different battlefield than one that has been fought before. Instead of physically, it's done over a network or through a virtual reality, proxy warfare like no other. Now, there are several reasons that warfare like this can be done. For example, the world itself has reached a plateau where no longer countries are seeking to take each other over because what each other has is just not enough or worth the effort. So instead they turn to virtual reality to demonstrate their power and importance. And again, this can be done on smaller levels or greater levels, whether you decide to include the government or organizations or simply gangs on the internet. And then of course you can take this to the very next level where you have a world that's being completely destroyed or taken over by an artificial intelligence. So when it comes to fighting each other, it has to be done over the network because the world is just a barren landscape. The plot of this story will often follow skilled hackers or hacktivists who use their cyber prowess to either expose corruption, evade powerful enemies, or manipulate the digital landscape in this cyber warfare. However this cyber warfare is done, it's a fight for information, for power and dominance. These are the most common themes when it comes to this story's idea. Like I said, this is breaking it down to its simplest form, so there's plenty of room to add your own creativity. For the more light-hearted and fantastic idea, we look to an example like Ready Player One or even Spy Kids 3. But if you want something that's a bit more grim, you can take inspiration from The Matrix, for example, which in itself is a different virtual reality but far darker than that of Ready Player One's. And now let's talk about the fourth trope, which comes down to the very basic and often utilized corporate control and corruption. Now in this cyberpunk world, it's no longer about politics, but about mega corporations who exert immense influence over society, often acting as the de facto governments. They control the resources, the technology, and the information. Because when it comes down to it, that seems to be the goal of many long-standing companies, to grow in order to survive. And in this cyberpunk dystopia, the capping point is them becoming a government in themselves. Now, again, this is something that we might say is already in place today, but you can of course use it as an idea for your cyberpunk story. There's a lot of ideas that come from reality when it comes to cyberpunk dystopias, so certainly you can take inspiration from today's players to help you write your story. The plot typically follows individuals or groups attempting to undermine the corporations and expose their corruption. These protagonists may be whistleblowers, corporate spies, or rebels challenging the dominance of these corporate giants, often at great personal risk. But of course that really goes without saying, you need to have stakes in your plot. Once more, this is an idea that can be surrounding an entire plot, or it could be a feature in your cyberpunk world space. It's entirely up to you. And that brings me to the final trope and idea, which is Neon-Noir Detective stories, and this is one of my favorites, if not my favorite trope to read in a cyberpunk novel. Now this trope, it can blend dark and gritty atmosphere of film noir with cyberpunk aesthetics, so expect a cityscape filled with rain-soaked streets, mysterious alleys, and obviously neon lights to add that science fiction flair to it, as well as hint at the dystopia that is surrounding it. It's a world space that appeals to me because noir stories and mysteries from the 1940s and 50s I felt had a lot of character to them, and it's one of those ideas that really inspired me to become a writer. So obviously to see something like that in the science fiction genre, or in this case the cyberpunk subgenre, well, of course I'm gonna like it over many other ideas. That being said, this is a story that's often a lot more grounded because it's focusing on individual characters and often a detective trying to solve a mystery or track down a murderer, something like that. That's not to say it can't go to a grander scale, but most of the time it tends to keep things as grounded as possible to focus on character development rather than the changing of the world space, which tends to be commonplace as well in the cyberpunk genre. Because in a dystopia, obviously one of the most go-to story ideas is simply about changing it from a dystopia and progressing back towards an average society, even a utopia if you can be so positive about it. Now the plot of the story is basic. As I said, you have your central character, usually a detective or private investigator, and they're involved in some complex, morally ambiguous case. Now this can delve into conspiracies, missing persons, cybercrimes. This often gets them involved or entangled with corrupt organizations or even government, or just wealthy figures just seeking control in this dystopian world space. And there you have it, 5 ideas that you can use to create your cyberpunk story. Now you can use any of these ideas or all of these ideas. Like I said, these are all very basic. They can be a simple feature in your story, or they can be the entire story itself. That is all up to you. I have done several videos on writing the cyberpunk genre, so if you're looking for some more tips and advice, specifically about writing stories rather than finding ideas, well, there's links to that in the description below. And if you want some more premium education on this genre, then I also have a course available on my workshop. Now my workshop is a one-time payment deal, so you not only get access to that course, but all my courses, past, present, and future. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, again, there's a link to it in the description below. Of course, if you're familiar with the genre and have some ideas you want to share with beginner writers, you can do so in the comments below, or perhaps suggest a topic for a future video. Is there any aspect of writing that you seem to be struggling with? Be sure to let me know in the comments. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next episode of Writing Today. Good day, good night, and happy writing.